Hello and welcome to The Search. I'm Shahei Jurgen. We're going to be examining Psalm 86 in this lesson, and we'll begin by reading the psalm in its entirety. Psalm 86, a prayer of David, beginning in verse 1. Hear me, Yahweh, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Guard my life, for I am faithful to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant, Lord, for I put my trust in you. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you. Hear my prayer, Yahweh. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I'm in distress, I call to you because you answer me. Among the gods there is none like you, Lord. No deeds can compare with yours. All the nations you have made will come and worship before you, Lord. They will bring glory to your name. For you are great and do marvelous deeds. You alone are God. Teach me your way, Yahweh, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name. I will praise you, Lord my God, with all my heart. I will glorify your name forever. For great is your love toward me. You have delivered me from the depths, from the realm of the dead. Arrogant foes are attacking me, O God. Ruthless people are trying to kill me. They have no regard for you. But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. Turn to me and have mercy on me. Show your strength in behalf of your servant. Save me, because I serve you just as my mother did. Give me a sign of your goodness, that my enemies may see it and be put to shame. For you, Yahweh, have helped me and comforted me. We're going to examine this psalm, and the title of our study is A Prayer from the Lord's Servant. A Prayer from the Lord's Servant. Now, throughout Book 3 of the Psalter, we have seen how Israel's relationship with God has been in question. As the nation faces exile, the people have been forced to ponder whether or not God has entirely abandoned them. So that we get questions like this in Psalm 74 and verse 1. O God, why have you rejected us forever? Why does your anger smolder against the sheep of your pasture? Now, while it's true that God has promised to judge the nations, Israel's current state of extreme suffering has convinced them that God is angry with them, and they know it is God alone who is to be feared, who can stand before him when he is angry, according to Psalm 76 and verse 7. So the question that has really plagued the minds of the Israelites throughout this period of tumult is, how long will God's anger persist? Will you be angry forever? Psalm 79 and verse 5. How long will your anger smolder against the prayers of your people? Psalm 80 and verse 4. And all of these concerns and fears culminate in this passage in Psalm 85, verses 4 through 7, where the people plead, "Restore us again, God, our Savior, and put away your displeasure toward us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger through all generations? Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your unfailing love, Yahweh, and grant us your salvation." While Psalms 84 and 85 do offer a markedly optimistic hope for the restoration of temple and the promised land, there's still this lingering doubt about God's relationship with Israel. And so it is fitting that the compilers of the Psalter have placed a solo Psalm of David right here at this point in Book 3. Psalm 86 is an individual prayer attributed to David, and this is somewhat unexpected for at least two reasons. First of all, Psalm 72 includes this statement which closes Book 2 of the Psalter. This concludes the prayers of David, son of Jesse. That's Psalm 72 and verse 20. Of course, it appears that this statement doesn't mean there are no more Davidic psalms to come. In fact, there are 17 psalms attributed to David in books 4 and 5. Now, almost every psalm in Book 3 has been communal. So another oddity about this David psalm is that it's an individual prayer. And these various oddities beg the question as to why this Davidic prayer has been placed here. Another interesting tidbit about Psalm 86 is it's entirely lacking in anything unique. I mean, nearly every single line in this prayer can be found in some other psalm or elsewhere in Scripture. And this has led some scholars to suspect that maybe David did not actually write Psalm 86, but someone else, drawing from his various other psalms, has composed this psalm in David's likeness. Now, whether David actually wrote it or not is immaterial, since Psalm 86, we know, reflects truths that we can attest from other biblical passages and even from other Davidic psalms. The emphasis of Psalm 86 is David's relationship with the Lord. The compilers of the Psalter likely intend for David here to stand as Israel's representative, and for his own covenantal connection with Yahweh to be used to remind God not just about his relationship with David, who of course at this point has been dead for centuries, but God's relationship with the nation as a whole. You're going to notice that the title Lord, which comes from the Hebrew word Adonai, is used 7 times in this song, emphasizing Yahweh's rule and supreme authority. And then you'll find that the author is going to refer to himself as your servant 3 times, including at key places at the start and close of the psalm. Tate, in his commentary, also highlights that this prayer follows a chiastic structure, so that you have an opening section which parallels a closing section where the self-reference of servant can be found. You have then a couple of sections towards the beginning and towards the end which emphasize the abounding chesed or loyal love of God. In verse 7, we get this mention of a time of distress, and that's explained a little bit later in verse 14. O God, the godless have risen against me. So we see specific mention there of some enemies. And then, towards the middle of the psalm, there are 2 doxologies in verses 8 through 10, and then in verses 12 through 13. And that leads us to the center, to the heart of Psalm 86, which we'll read about in verse 11. Now, the central part of the prayer in verse 11 is really the key to understanding this whole prayer. Teach me your way, Yahweh, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name. Of course, in light of the recent Psalms, which have all highlighted Israel's unbelief and rebellion as being the cause of their exile, this prayer request is powerful and most applicable to the exilic situation. The people of God needed to be reminded of something, of a core truth that they had forgotten. They need to be taught to trust in God and to respect his name. And so Tanner writes this: David's prayers may be ended, but the dynasty of kings and the nation go on. This prayer of an individual also stands in this book to remind us that individual and community concerns are bound together. All right, with these things in mind, let's go to the text now. Psalm 86, a prayer of David, beginning in verse 1. Hear me, Yahweh, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Guard my life, for I am faithful to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God, have mercy on me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant, Lord, for I put my trust in you. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you. Hear my prayer, Yahweh. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I'm in distress, I call to you because you answer me. Like many prayers in the Psalter, Psalm 86 emphasizes the need to be heard by God. Hear me, Yahweh, I call to you. Hear my prayer, Yahweh. Listen to my cry, and I call to you. All of these statements found in the first 6 verses. The earnest desire is that God will both hear and respond. So verse 1 says, answer me, and verse 7 says, because you answer me. Throughout this introductory section, many of God's most well-known attributes are mentioned, such as his forgiveness, his goodness, and his love. Both the sacred name Yahweh and the title Lord are going to be employed throughout the prayer. Now, in contrast to God's name, title, and character, notice that the psalmist describes himself as helpless and needy. He's just a servant who trusts in God and is ever loyal to him. Remember, of course, that because Psalm 86 is structured as a chiasm, many of these themes are going to reappear in their parallel sections at the end of the prayer. We'll see more of God's attributes being named. We'll see more talk of the lordship of Yahweh and the author as being God's faithful servant. Okay, now we resume in verses 8 through 10. Among the gods, there is none like you, Lord. No deeds can compare with yours. All the nations you have made will come and worship before you, Lord. They will bring glory to your name, for you are great and do marvelous deeds. You alone are God. Now, in these verses, which parallel, again, verses 12 through 13, after we get through the middle text, the hinge, verse 11, you see that the agonized plea, which opens and closes the psalm, gives way to doxology. Here, the supremacy and uniqueness of God, who is worthy of praise and glorification, becomes the central focus. Now, first, the psalmist acknowledges the supremacy of God's works over and against the lesser gods of the nations. And we've talked about those lesser gods who were judged and condemned by God in Psalm 82 for leading the nations into grievous acts of injustice, especially the mistreatment of the poor. Concerning Yahweh's treatment of the poor, David elsewhere wrote, "My whole being will exclaim, 'Who is like you, Yahweh? You rescue the poor from those too strong for them, the poor and needy from those who rob them.'" Psalm 35 and verse 10. Additionally, Psalm 86 declares that God is the originator of the nations, and as such, they should abandon those lesser gods to worship and glorify Yahweh only. After all, he alone is God who does great and marvelous deeds, says verse 10. Now, we started with an opening cry, followed by a doxology, and that brings us now to the central petition of this psalm in verse 11, followed again by more praise, which parallels this praise here in verses 8 through 10. So, in verses 11 through 13, we read, "Teach me your way, Yahweh, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name. I will praise you, Lord my God, with all my heart. I will glorify your name forever, for great is your love toward me. You have delivered me from the depths, from the realm of the dead." Verse 11 is a powerful request when considered alongside the overarching message, of course, of this prayer especially. The psalmist has confessed his faith in God. He believes God to be supreme over the lesser gods. He believes God is worthy of the worship of the nations. In verses 12 and 13, he adds a personal reason for praising God. Not only is God supreme and God's works are supreme, but he says, "Great is your love toward me. You have delivered me from the depths, from the realm of the dead." And yet, in spite of all of this, what the author knows to be true, in spite of his personal trust and loyalty towards God, he knows he has much to learn, and there are many areas in which he needs to grow. And it's with all this in mind that he asks God to become his teacher. But I want you to notice especially what David wants God to teach him. "Teach me that I may rely on your faithfulness." Rely on your trustworthiness. Now, this to me sounds very similar to a statement that was made to Jesus by a very troubled father. You might remember on one occasion that some of Jesus' disciples had been unable to cast out a demon from a boy who was experiencing horrific torment. The boy's father was beside himself. He told Jesus that his son had been afflicted of this evil spirit from childhood. It had often tried to kill the boy. Now, Jesus said to that man that he could heal this child if the father would just believe. And you might remember that in anguish, that father replied to Jesus, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Mark 9 and verse 24. And I've always loved this statement because it really is expressive of the life of faith. I mean, the life of faith is always lived in that tension between belief and unbelief, which we could also maybe call doubt or even struggle. Psalm 86 affirms this truth. The psalmist says, on the one hand, in verse 4, "I put my trust in you." That's a pretty bold statement, which is then followed up on the other hand with verse 11, "Teach me that I may rely on you," or on your faithfulness. Now, alongside helping his unbelief or his lack of fully trusting in God, the psalmist additionally requests, "Give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name." Or as the NLT translates this line, "Grant me purity of heart so that I may honor you." Golden Gay writes this, "While the request has implications for a life that is lived in a godly way, it refers first to the life lived by trust in Yahweh as the God who does act thus." In the context, walking in Yahweh's faithfulness means walking a path that Yahweh's faithfulness protects and surrounds. At the moment, the path does not look like this. The psalmist wants to experience it that way. Now, why does the psalmist need this help? Why is it currently such a struggle for him to fully trust in God? I mean, he's trying. He wants to, but he needs God to teach him how to do it more, how to fully rely on the trustworthiness or the faithfulness of God. But he's having difficulty, and the reason for that difficulty is further explained beginning in verse 14. "Arrogant foes are attacking me, O God. Ruthless people are trying to kill me. They have no regard for you. But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. Turn to me and have mercy on me. Show your strength in behalf of your servant. Save me, because I serve you just as my mother did. Give me a sign of your goodness, that my enemies may see it and be put to shame. For you, Yahweh, have helped me and comforted me." Reminiscent of many Davidic laments, the author of Psalm 86 is beset by enemies. His enemies are also God's enemies, a striking connection to the content of Book 3 of the Psalter, where God's enemies have destroyed Israel and Judah, and God's people have called on him to respond. Now, in contrast to the arrogant and ruthless foes who are trying to kill the author, notice that he invokes also the God creed of Exodus 34. We've talked about this passage when God passes by Moses, who is tucked in the cleft of the rock, and he reveals something about his character. In the opening section, God's forgiveness, goodness, and love were all mentioned, whereas now we have even more. The author calls upon his compassion, grace, patience, love again, and faithfulness again. In the opening section, the psalmist wanted God to listen and answer his prayer. Remember all that? Hear me, listen to my cry. Now he wants God to turn. Don't just hear, but to turn to him and to show his strength by saving him from his enemies. Now, a very interesting line of this psalm is found in verse 16. "Save me, because I serve you just as my mother did." A more literal rendering of this phrase can be found in the NASB that says, "Grant your strength to your servant and save the son of your maidservant." And I think the idea here is that since both David and his mother served God, that Yahweh should be all the more inclined to help him. Now, what's interesting about this is that while David's siblings and father are named in Scripture, his mother's name is never revealed. There is a reference to David's mother during the time when David was on the run from King Saul. We read it here in 1 Samuel 22, verses 3 and 4. From the cave of Adullam, David went to Mizpah in Moab and said to the king of Moab, would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me? So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him as long as David was in the stronghold. So the situation here is that David wants to ensure that his family is going to be safe from Saul. So during this time when he's on the run, he entrusts their care and protection with the Moabites. Later, generations of rabbis claim that David's mother was named Nitzavit. And while almost nothing is known about her, we can at least imagine the influence that she had over her son, who grew up to be a paragon of faithfulness to God. Not a perfect man. Certainly he was flawed in many respects, and yet he was faithful. I mean, like the Blessed Virgin Mary, David's mother surely shaped her son into the servant of God that he became. In the final verses of Psalm 86, the author asks for a sign of God's goodness, which would be manifest in the humiliation of his enemies. And this language here is very reminiscent of what we encountered in Psalm 83, when that psalm closed with these words in verses 17 and 18, may the enemy nations ever be ashamed and dismayed. May they perish in disgrace. Let them know that you, whose name is Yahweh, that you alone are the most high over all the earth. And so David's plea for rescue and for the humiliation of his enemies is Judah's plea, Israel's plea for the same. That those who have perpetrated their exile, that those who have imprisoned them and killed many of their kinsmen would also be put to shame, so that God would be supreme over all. Now, at first glance, Psalm 86 really looks like just a generic lament prayer from David. If we just pulled it out of the book of Psalms and read it that way, that's the way it would seem to us. Like other laments, it includes all those things that we have come to familiarize ourselves with this style. It has an address to God, it has some complaints, petitions, statements of trust, and praise. Beautiful doxologies, in fact. However, if the compilers of the Psalter thought of this psalm as just another Davidic lament, surely we wouldn't find it here. We would find it back in either Book 1 or Book 2, where all the others can be found. But it's put here in Book 3, so obviously out of place for a reason. And I think the reason is that this is a deliberate attempt to flag this psalm as not just another Davidic lament, but as something out of the ordinary. And perhaps the best way to ponder the significance of this psalm in Book 3 is to think again about David as a representative of Israel. After the destruction of Jerusalem, the people of God had little reason to hope. In exile, their suffering and despair surely brought them to the point of entirely giving up on God. Yet for those who knew their history and scriptures, there had to be at least some comfort in recalling that great promise that God made to David. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. The prophet Nathan declared to King David in 2 Samuel 7 and verse 16. And of course, this theology is found in the Psalter. Psalms 2 and 72 speak of a time when the whole world, even the Babylonians, the pagan nations, and all of the rest, will come under the rule of an heir of David, his son, his descendant, who would be God's ideal king. And so Psalm 86 is not just one man's prayer for deliverance from his enemies. It really is representative of the cry of the exilic community. Remember, however, that while deliverance from an enemy is part of this prayer, it's not the main request. And this is another thing I love about Psalm 86. Teach me your way, Yahweh, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name. In exile, there would be little reason to have confidence in the faithfulness of God. But As a friend reminded me not long ago, a little faith is better than no faith. And so Psalm 86 is a prayer request that God will take that little germ of faith, whatever the people had left in their time of discouragement and despair, that little germ of faith in their hearts, and that God would help it to grow. Just like that man who said those words to Jesus, I believe, help my unbelief. A prayer, a cry that God will take us through those times of doubt and struggle, that we may learn to more fully trust in Him. May God grant that to each and every one of us. Thank you for joining me in this study of Psalm 86. I look forward to continuing our journey through the Psalter together next time. God bless.